Okay, so thank you, Efka. As Efka said, I'm Ralph Youngen from ACS. I'm one of the co-chairs of RA21. And I'm going to start with this slide that you have maybe seen before, but I want to since we talked so much today about needing to have collaborative initiatives among our industry to stand up shared infrastructure for the benefit of all, I want to remind everyone that's exactly what RA21 is. We've been working together since 2016 on this multi-stakeholder initiative. The important part here is not that you can read or can't read the individual organizations here, but the diversity of the organizations here. The purple are corporate clients of ours. The yellow are academic institutions, the red are software and service providers, and the green are publishers that have been working with us. And so it is exactly that kind of collaborative initiative that I think we've been talking about today, that we need moving forward here. I also will note that some people have shared with me, in lunch and here at the conference, that, we kind of expected RA21 might work for a year or so and, then kind of run out of steam. Not at all the case. We are going strong. To put it in the words of a startup, if we were a startup, we've been through our seed rounds of funding, and we were just funded for Series A. So we have a green light to move forward, to move this into an operational service, and Chris will share more about that real soon. And the reason why, I think, is because we are working to solve what is a very big problem for our industry. Researchers have difficulty accessing scholarly resources that we provide to them. But I hope what you get out of this talk today is an understanding this is not just a problem within our industry. This is a problem more pervasively for researchers generally. So the two quotes that I have here, the first on the left is within our industry. Letty Conrad recently posted in the Scholarly Kitchen that our shared systems for authentication are out of step, out of date, and that this is a big problem. She's reporting on some of the sessions at the Electronic Resources and Libraries Conference that says there were a dozen or more talks about this problem, and RA21 featured prominently in some of those talks. What you may not be so aware is that outside of our industry, this is a problem. On the right there, FIM4R stands for Federated Identity Management for Researchers. This is a grassroots effort that was started by the research community that is basically saying, look, science is hard enough, but we have trouble collaborating with one another. And we all know that science is done collaboratively and done at a distance collaboratively. And what they're saying is, we have to resort to consumer-grade, Dropbox and Google Drive and things like that simply because we can't effectively collaborate and have workspaces to work with one another. We need help from the community to solve this problem for us. And RA21 is absolutely helping both within our industry and researchers more generally. So you also know that there's a problem within your industry when startups come to fill a void. And in the last few years, we have had quite a number of startups that are filling this void that we have kind of termed access brokers, meaning, they are software or configurations that need to be made in order to help researchers get access to scholarly information resources. We feel that these are great interim steps. They certainly do solve, some of the pain that researchers have, but there are some negatives associated with them. And this has been published in the past on our blog, and we've listed some of those negatives on the right. That they have to be installed and configured, by the researcher ahead of time. They are really based on IP address recognition. There are some concerns, perhaps, on privacy issues with some of these and things of that nature. So RA21 is really working to produce a more comprehensive solution to this problem. And we do believe that there is a better way. And the ironic part is the better way is something that we all have already in place. Federated identity management systems based on SAML you might know as Shibboleth, because that's the implementation that most publishers and academic institutions have put in place. We have had that technology in place largely for over a decade. It's very mature technology. It establishes multilateral trust. It's widely deployed by publishers, by our subscribers, by our corporate subscribers as well. So what's the problem here? The problem is the user experience is, quite frankly, horrible. We've been putting up these menus where users have to navigate these complex menus to try to find their institution so that they can figure out how to log in through their own institution in order to get access when off campus. And so this is what RA21 is really focused on, is solving that user experience problem. So the user experience building blocks that we have come up with are listed here, that we need a consistent visual cue for our users to see across all of our websites. We need to, the users are going to have to go through a discovery process once to find their home institution, but they should only ever have to do that once. Once they do that, their choice, their institution's basically login page, the pointer to their login page is cached in their browser so that they never have to do it again. And it looks something like this. The first time that you encounter an RA21 button on a publisher's website, you see this access through your institution. You go through that process to find your institution. Forevermore, your choice is remembered, and that button magically changes to list the name of your institution across all the publishers that are participating in this ecosystem. That is the essence of what we've been working to build with RA21. I also want to pause for a second and say, we have recently started to shift our vocabulary a bit when we talk about access, because the common criticism that we are hearing from the library community is, well, why do we need RA21? Open access is the solution to the access problem that researchers have. And we're pushing back on that and saying, no, not exactly. Access means more than simply just paywalled subscription-based access. RA21 can easily help researchers to access an institutional discount to pay their article processing charges for open access, for example. We have had direct conversations with CCC recently. They get it. They think this is a great use case, and they are saying that, yes, of course, we will support RA21 when it comes out so that researchers can have easier access to those institutional discounts that they are entitled to. Moreover, access to research infrastructure. Like the second picture there, LIGO stands for the Laser Interferometer what's the G? Gravitational wave. Thank you. Gravitational wave is the story. Exactly. So researchers need to access these kinds of facilities remotely. They need to prove who they are, and that access based upon your institutional affiliation is exactly the kind of thing that RA21 can facilitate. Even the last example that I have there is Apple Computer's website. If you want an educational discount to purchase Apple hardware, you have to prove that you are affiliated with an institution. Okay, exactly. That's another type of access that RA21 can leverage. So this is much broader than just publisher paywalls is the takeaway message here. So we have actually, in recognition of that, we have changed where we started from our logo at the top to the logo at the bottom, recognizing that we don't want to be perpetuating the sense that RA21 is all about maintaining publisher paywalls, which that keyhole might represent, that RA21 is really about using your institutional affiliation to get access to whatever your institution is providing for you. So that's a change that we've made recently. So with that, I will try to give you a demo of where we are right now with our user experience. Good, it's working. Okay. So imagine this is a Google Scholar search result, and I click on the first link, which happens to go to an ACS article. I have not logged in the past, and so I see this Access Through Your Institution button here. So I click on that, and I have to go through this one-time search process. So this is intelligent. I can type Los Angeles and get a list of everything in all the institutions in Los Angeles. I can also type UCLA, and because the email domain of UCLA is ucla.edu, it finds that as well. So I'm going to go through Johns Hopkins, and I will perform a real login here. This is the same login page that I would see every single day logging into Johns Hopkins, and all I have to do is log in there, and you'll see now that I have access to that PDF. So now here's where the magic comes in. When I go to another publisher site, that is remembered. And even though this is on a different publisher site, it remembers that Johns Hopkins is the preferred login location. At this point, it is a single click. I'm already logged in, and so there's nothing more than a single click to be able to authenticate there. Without RA21, I would have been going through about 3 or 4 or maybe 5 pages of screens where I would have to choose and find my institution once again. We make it a single click, and you're there. And that's what RA21 is really all about. So let me go back here. So we have taken over 2 years of working on that user experience, and we have documented that in a NISO, a draft NISO recommended practice. We just submitted that recommended practice to NISO formally earlier this week. I also just want to point out here, the team has conducted nearly around 200 sometimes face-to-face, sometimes remote, but live user feedback sessions with practicing researchers and librarians and students to help inform the user experience development. So the recommended practice will be out soon. Todd, I'm going to turn over to Todd here in a second, and he'll tell you a little bit more about the process, and I encourage you to look at it. But here are some of the key recommendations that we are making in this document: that we should adopt multilateral federations. Those largely exist already in the academic community. In the spaces where they don't exist, like in some of the corporate sectors, we encourage those to be formed. Through the pilots that RA21 worked with, we worked with members of the Pharmaceutical Documentation Ring, which is a group of 26 leading pharma companies, and they are absolutely looking at forming a federation. Another recommendation is to ensure that privacy is preserved in this setting. The RP does talk about specific code of conduct that we endorse, that all publishers should endorse, and that's mentioned in there. Then kind of the core recommendations in the recommended practice are around improving the user experience and around that persistence of the identity provider that I showed you. Around improving the SAML metadata quality. That's so that we can make sure that alternate names of universities and logos and things like that are available to help with recognition. And that things like timeouts need to be set differently in different contexts. And so those are all the different kind of key recommendations that we have. And I'll give you a little bit of sneak peek at some of the a few of the visuals from the recommended practice itself. This is really kind of an implementation guide for publishers, and I really want you to think about the fact that we have documented a lot of that user experience feedback, testing that we've done. So you're getting free consultation, from that, and I hope you'll look at those recommended practices that when they come out and adopt them on your site. So with that, I will turn it over to Todd and let him talk about the process that will go through.
Sure. In talking with EFCA, we've tried to strategize about what would keep you here to the end of the day. And I figure a good 10, 15 minutes about NISO process, that's going to really bring the conference home, right? And I'm just joking. I only have one slide on this. The public comment period for the document that we've received will open next week. We're targeting Wednesday, possibly Tuesday if we're lucky. For a 30-day public comment period in which any of you, any from the library community, any interested scholars, can comment on the draft and the recommendations in that. At the end of that period, those comments will be brought back to the steering committee of the RA21 initiative. It'll take us hopefully a month or thereabouts to issue final recommendations, a response to those comments, and then finally publish the recommended practice. We're targeting ALA for ideally the launch. Now, there have been a variety of issues and complaints about RA21. You might have seen some of them on the Scholarly Kitchen, heard them through the library community, and many of those surround the issue of privacy. And this is a significant concern for the library community. Librarians have an ethical, sometimes a legal responsibility to protect the privacy of patrons. Even if the patrons are like, hey, go ahead, track me. Librarians still have an issue with that. And there have been many conversations about privacy and its implications here with regard to RA21. Because the underlying technology, SAML, can be used for a variety of use cases. It was designed for a variety of use cases. Some of those use cases are very robust. It can be used for course management systems, in which it is critical to know that I am Todd Carpenter and I'm enrolled in Psych 101, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's designed to provide that information. However, it is also really important to know that it doesn't have to work that way. It was also designed with a library anonymous use case in mind. And RA21 is doubling down on that. In the recommendations, we want to use pseudonymous IDs so that the publisher doesn't know necessarily who that individual user is. Libraries may, if they so choose, add additional attributes. This is a faculty member, this is someone from the chemistry department, to provide additional tracking for different communities, or possibly customized pricing, et cetera. There's a variety of different applications. But it's important to note that the institution controls the attributes that are released. It's not controlled by the publisher, it's up to the institution. And in the recommendation, we recommend as minimal amount of metadata as possible. And in that regard, what we've done is adopted the GÉANT Data Protection Code of Conduct. Ralph mentioned this. But it goes into pretty specific detail about what you can and should do with data. Data minimization, limitations for purpose. We're currently using the first version of that privacy policy, primarily because the second one is still in draft mode, but we would have adopted the second one had it been finalized, and we don't want to adopt something that isn't yet final, but we're headed in that direction. Part of the challenge here, though, and this is one of the issues that we're going to have as a community in communicating the value of RA21, is the separation between the IT department, the campus IT department, and the library technology staff. And there is a large difference between those two entities, and they don't always talk well together. And many different chats and conversations online about communication between the two. And the librarian's fear is that the IT department doesn't protect or doesn't have the same issues and values as it comes to privacy and considerations about data sharing. Because as default, They're working with course management systems, and they're working with other things in which you do want to and need to share certain amounts of information. And this is also compounded by the fact that there isn't necessarily great support for the library from the IT department. This is some data from OhioLink. They did a survey of their members, so libraries within Ohio. And 80-some% didn't have dedicated IT staff to support the library. So we're going to be walking in and saying, you need to have a conversation with your IT department to implement SAML implementation to do sign-on systems. That is inherently concerning for them. And there was a statement, public statement by Stanford, led by Stanford, but it's for the Ivies Plus group. So that's the Ivy League plus a variety of other large institutions. And they were concerned about this and the directions that we're heading based on some of these privacy issues. And there's a lot that we can do to support awareness about this and the fact that this solution, RA21, is designed and built around a privacy-protecting market. And we can also use this as an opportunity to help foster better relationships between the library IT and the campus IT, and that should be viewed as a good thing. So with that, I'm going to pass it on to Chris. He's going to talk about moving this into something that you all can use.
Hi, everybody. So I have the privilege of being the last speaker of the last presentation on the last day of the conference. But hopefully enough to keep you interested. I think this is the third time we've spoken about RA21 at this conference, and I think it'll be the last time you'll hear us talk about RA21. Because what we're now doing as we transition into this operational mode is we are forming a coalition with some of the parties that we've been working with so far in the project mode, and we're going to call this the Coalition for Seamless Access. RA21 was a fairly random acronym. I think we came up after a brainstorm on the back of an envelope, and it doesn't really explain what it's about. You can see from the UX that Ralph presented earlier, the user experience is all about accessing through your institution, providing that seamless access, so it made sense to us as the new name. Parties in the coalition, STM, and you heard earlier from Afka and Ralph that STM have just agreed earlier in the week to continued funding as we move into the next phase. Internet2 and Giant, these are organizations you may not be familiar with, but they're essentially research and education network organizations. Internet2 runs the big research and academic network in the US. Giant is an association of research and education network operators in Europe. These are the people who really invented SAML, invented Shibboleth, understand at a very deep level these secure, privacy-preserving authentication protocols. NISO obviously has been involved all the way through, and Todd's been a great advocate of the interests and the concerns of the library community. We're working with ORCID because very relevant to what they do in terms of individual identity, and also they've done a great job, I think, over the past 7-8 years of convening a community of interest across multiple groups of stakeholders. And we're in early discussions with IFLA. It's really important, and we really want to have the libraries have a seat at the table as we move into the next phase. What we're trying to do as we move into this next stage of the activity or the project is to avoid doing what we've always done as a community in the past, which is creating yet another single-purpose non-profit organization to take this forward. Right, we've done this with Crossref, ORCID, Cantor, et cetera, et cetera. We think there's another model because the problem with non-profits is they need kind of a large overhead component of themselves. They need to have support management, finance departments. Most importantly, they need to go and recruit members. And that turns out to be really expensive. And we've done a little bit of looking at some of the existing organizations, and they spend roughly half of their income on just sustaining themselves. So the model we're trying to put together is to essentially build a coalition among existing membership organizations in the various sectors that represent the stakeholders of the group. And as we move into this next phase, We'll have a lightweight memorandum and understanding among those stakeholders. The idea is each one of the stakeholders brings resources to bear that are specific to the contribution they can make. So STM is going to, in this next phase, essentially run the secretariat, publisher outreach, further UX development. NISO is going to provide some resourcing for library outreach, and Youngen and Internet2 are going to do the technical development operations through SUNET, which is the Swedish network operator who we've been working with very closely already. We have a draft mission purpose statement. I won't read that out to you because you can all read it. The important things I'd stress is, as Ralph mentioned, we're broadening. We don't really want to talk just about access to journal articles or even scholarly content. The problem space is, as Ralph explained, obtaining institutionally credentialed access to resources that care about what institution you're from. It's a very broad problem, and we think the solution we've put in place is very broad. So we talk about collaboration tools, information resources, shared research infrastructure. In terms of timing, so we're kind of in a bridge mode probably through July, where we're tying up the recommended practice. We've been having discussions so far this year to bring the new governance structure into place. And we think by the middle of the year, we'll be formally launching our beta phase. And the beta phase is where we want to start to get implementations from early adopters. We want to demonstrate and prove the benefit that we expect to see from the new user experience. And then we think next year, I think we'll run the beta probably for 9 to 12 months, and we'll be then moving into kind of long-term operations. So what are we expecting to get out of the beta? As I said, duration 6 to 12 months. We want to test the coalition model and make sure that's going to stand up to really running and operating a real service. Implement production quality, production scale services. This is important. So it's beta from the point of view of testing the concept, refining and tweaking the operating model. It's not beta from the point of view of, is this reliable software that's going to be able to be integrated into your sites? We want to encourage broad adoption of the recommended practice across multiple use cases, right? So not just, again, the subscription journal article use case. We really want to get the kind of APC use case included. We really want to get use cases from some of those other sectors, such as research infrastructure, in this phase. And we'd like the early adopters to report against some aggregated success metrics that we're also starting to develop as a team. And we want to continue doing more research to confirm the value to users and adopters. A little bit about SUNET, as I mentioned. They're going to do our technical operations, very experienced in this space. We wanted to select somebody, an organization that was perceived as neutral by publishers, libraries, federation operators, used to supporting high availability technical infrastructure and understand the technology, and willing and able to stand this up for everybody around the world. We think as we go beyond beta, there may be other organizations who help with the operations, but SUNET are going to run the beta for us. And really, what are we going to do in the beta? We're going to actually productionize that common UI element. I won't get too much into the technology, but essentially, this is a piece of JavaScript that's served up from a central domain that you drop into your sites. We're also going to have an optional discovery service, right? So that one-time process of finding out where you're from. For people who don't want to or don't need to implement one of those for themselves, there'll be a centralized service that should make for really lightweight integration. And the centralized IDP persistence service, that piece of magic that once you've selected your identity provider on one participating site, it carries across to all the others. As I mentioned, for folks that implement during the beta, and we really hope some of you in the room will be doing that, essentially you've got to drop the access button onto your site, and that brings the persistence service with it, or encourage your hosting provider to do so if you don't host your own site, and be prepared to share aggregate data about success metrics. We're still in the early stages of discussing those, but we're thinking of things like at the aggregate level, access success rates, maybe do some user satisfaction surveying, reduction in support tickets related to access, that kind of thing. And as we've said before, we're not proposing, and we're not going to propose anytime soon, that anybody implements this as their only mechanism of access, right? What we're suggesting is that where you've got SAML in place and where you've got institutions using that for off-site access, off-campus access, essentially nothing very much changes from the institutional point of view, other than it gets a heck of a lot easier to use, right? And we think that once we have some evidence that that is indeed the case, then it becomes an easier discussion to say, well, actually, why do you need to keep these other things around? Because they don't really add very much value. So that's it, and I think we've probably got a few minutes left for questions if anybody has any. But thank you very much.